On today's episode, we're chatting about how the traditional methods for helping women and couples fall pregnant can sometimes be counterproductive. I'm interviewing a very special guest today, the one and only Spenser Brassard, who will show you how using the power of your mind and the mind-body connection will make all the difference. Not only as you're trying to conceive, but in helping you build the life and the future that you really want. Welcome to Your Journey to Fertility. This is the podcast that blends both science with spirit to give you all the tools you need as you navigate your fertility journey. I'm your host, Jennifer Edmonds, and for the last 15 years, I've been helping women on their journeys to motherhood and beyond. I believe that combining the latest scientific research along with the best energetic and mindset practices will help you to avoid putting your life on hold and bring you closer to your baby. Here each week, you'll learn ways to support your fertility and trust your body so you can stop stressing that you'll never have a baby and finally walk your path to motherhood. This is the Your Journey to Fertility podcast. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your time with me today. And I'm so excited for you to hear this conversation that we've got coming up because today I am chatting with the wonderful Spenser Brassard about one of my most favorite topics, and that is how you can use the power of your mind and your mindset to help you fall pregnant. Spenser's podcast, Fertile Ground, which is also the name of her new book, was actually one of the very first podcasts that I listened to many years ago when I was on my own fertility journey. So it is awesome to have her with us today. And what I love most about Spenser's work is that, yes, she wants all of the women who work with her to fall pregnant and have their baby, of course, but her work is about so much more than that. Everything that she teaches is about helping you reclaim your power, reconnecting you to your body, and just helping you build the life that you want in all areas so that having a baby ends up just being the cherry on top of an already amazing life. Because whether or not you do have a baby, there is still so much of your life left to live. And shouldn't we want all of this to be incredible too? Spenser is a fertility expert, a life coach, a podcast host, and she is the author of the brand new book, Fertile Ground, a mind-body approach to getting pregnant without it taking over your life. She's the creator of the Fertility Mind-Body Mastery, and this is a program that shows women how to replace restriction with expansion and replace shame with compassion. I cannot wait for you to hear this episode. I absolutely loved chatting with Spenser. So let's begin. Welcome to the podcast. I'm thrilled to have you here. As we were saying just before we hit record, a little bit of a full circle moment because your podcast was one of those just beautiful shining lights in my own fertility journey many years ago. You helped me through so much as well. So it is an honor to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, I love to hear that. And I love to be here with you and just share everything that we've learned on our crazy fertility journeys.
And they're crazy. Yeah.
They're so crazy.
And the more you work in this space and the more you meet women who just have these unbelievable stories, it blows your mind, doesn't it? So can we start with your story? If people are not familiar with who you are, can you tell us just a little about you, what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to be a mom more than anything in the world. It was like the most important thing you could do with your body, from what I remember thinking and feeling. And I grew up from a long lineage of stay-at-home moms. So I put a lot of my worth into becoming a mother. And I thought, okay, once I reach that point, then I'll be worthy, right? Then I'll have made it. And it was what I wanted the most.
Mm.
And when we attach our worth to something, for some reason, it becomes harder. So I was 24 when I started trying to conceive and didn't work. Okay, we'll give a few more months. A year goes by, diagnosed with unexplained infertility. And of course, you go to Google and you do and try all the things. You do all the diets. You take all the supplements. You do and take on all of the restrictions and all of the rules to the point where you're living off of hardly any joy in your life. And it's still not working. And so I was basically designing my fertility journey off of the belief that the more I sacrifice, the more deserving I'll be of this being, which left me depleted, exhausted, burned out, confused, all of these things. And so I was kind of in working for my family's business, not loving the job. It was a cushy, well-paid job. And I was like, you know what? I need to move things around a bit. So I decided to become a life coach. I'd always been interested in psychology, and I loved learning about the mind and body connection and how our thoughts and our emotions influence our physiology. And it was fascinating to me that it really wasn't a part of needing to control my thoughts and manipulate them and think positive. That wasn't it at all. And the goal wasn't even to get pregnant. It was to feel both in my mind and my body like I was okay and that I was safe and that I could be at peace, regardless of getting pregnant. And so I became a fertility coach before I got pregnant. And so I started the Fertile Ground podcast, and I was like, I'm not suffering anymore. Like, I need to share this. This is not about getting pregnant as much as it is about stopping this suffering that our thoughts create within our world. And eventually we did IVF, got pregnant, but it led to a miscarriage. And then we did an FET a few months later, and that didn't work. But at that point, it was this really interesting point, almost like, I talk about it in my new book, Fertile Ground, but it was like that point of a hero's journey. Joseph Campbell's A Hero's Journey, where you're like, oh, do I let this evidence tell me like I fucked up again? Or do I decide I'm not going to do that anymore? And the phrase that I use in my book, it's like, I'm not going to be in that mean girl certainty of blaming myself, right? Because I find like when it doesn't work, when we get our periods, it's like, we want the certainty so much, even if we're defaulting into blaming ourselves. And so I decided I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to be in the uncertainty of not knowing why it didn't work. And just still kind of deciding to hold the trust that eventually it would happen. And despite having 2 failed IVFs and 8 years trying to conceive, we got pregnant naturally 2 months later. And then had our son, and then again got pregnant naturally, first time trying, with our now 1.5-year-old. So it makes no sense, and it makes all the sense. But it taught me a lot, and it was the best and the worst thing that ever happened to me because of how much growth came from it, and the tools and the skills that I now apply to every category of my life as a result of my fertility journey. It's something that I'll always hold very near and dear to me because of so many gifts that came out of it beyond having a baby. Best one of all being how to be nice to myself. Like, how do I show myself compassion, and how do I hold space for my humanity and still love myself? How do I let myself be a bitch and not hate myself? Right? It was like this, it was never about reaching this perfection. It was never about being always happy. It was never about always being positive. It was truly about meeting myself where I'm at, offering myself love, validation, and compassion. And that, I think, is what made me feel most safe in my mind and body, and in my spirit, of course. So yeah, that's my story.
Wild story, Spenser.
Isn't it?
It is. And I think so many people can relate to what you said about when you tie something that you want to your self-worth, it changes things enormously. And so much of what I want to share on this podcast and with all of the work that I do is that, yes, I'm not going to lie. My ultimate goal is to help women fall pregnant. Absolutely. But it is so much more than that, as you said. It is about being kinder to yourself, because when you can look at your journey as just something that is separate from how worthy you are, and when you are able to learn those tools of being able to support yourself, it helps you far beyond getting that positive pregnancy test. It's going to help you throughout pregnancy. And then really, like, the rest of your life is parenthood. And that is the biggest goal. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm so excited to get into everything that we have to talk about today and to learn a little bit more about why you wrote your book. But can we start
my new book.
Oh, it's going to be It's brilliant. For those who I won't give away any spoilers, but it's brilliant. So in leading to that, why is this typical approach to fertility counterintuitive and counterproductive? And you kind of touched on it before. You start doing all the things, the supplements, the restrictive diets, and you go down this rabbit hole of what more can I do? How less joyful can I make my life? So can you talk about how you see that showing up with a lot of your clients as well?
Yeah, totally. I think we try that conventional approach to fertility. We try to do everything. We try the very masculine hustle approach of, okay, well, if I do everything, then I'm not missing anything. And I'll increase my chances if I do everything, right? We have all of those thoughts in our heads. But we have to be honest with ourselves and saying, how does this approach make me feel? Do I feel more connected to myself? Does it make me feel like I'm actually being in relationship to my mind and my body? Or am I just kind of grasping at straws to see what works? And I think that there are people in which conventional fertility does work for. It's obviously it works for some people, but for a particular group of people, it doesn't. And a lot of my clients and a lot of the women that I attract, the conventional approach doesn't work. And that's okay. It's, generally what that looks like is it's people with highly sensitive nervous systems, right? So they're more kind of, they're more sensitive to the world. And so when things happen, things hit them a bit harder, including myself. And so I think that people that have highly sensitive nervous systems have an incredible gift to offer the world and to give the world. But it's a matter of coping with that highly sensitive nervous system so that we don't feel taken out anytime something doesn't necessarily go according to plan. So how do we respond to those moments of stress? And stress is not bad. It's inevitable, and that is acute stress, but chronic stress, the one that's weighing us down, the dark cloud that kind of tends to follow us and keeps us running on that hamster wheel. That's the one that we want to learn how to respond to with much more compassion. And honestly, just admit that it's not working, not only because I'm not getting pregnant, because I'm exhausted and I am a shell of who I used to be. Right. And so that's enough of a reason. That's enough feedback to know that conventional approach to fertility and to getting pregnant and probably to reaching a lot of your different goals that you have in life doesn't necessarily work because it's exhausting. It's exhausting.
You want to live in that state where there is this dark cloud following you, and it just gets into every little crack of your life. It takes over everything: your relationship, your friendships, your health, your work, your just ability to enjoy things again.
Yeah. And I do want to offer, like, anyone who's listening to this and they're like, oh, that's me. Oh my God. Another thing to be mad at myself for. Like, this is because of our culture. This is because of our upbringing. This is how we have been taught to work towards goals. This is how we have been taught to create. And I believe that there is a change wanting to occur in which we are able to create our lives and the things that we want from a much different place, from a more feminine place, from a more rested place, from a much more pleasurable place. So I don't want the shame to come in the back door to say, like, oh my God, I've been fucking this up. No, you haven't. This is culture's fuck up. And it's our jobs at this point to connect with our nature and to know that there is another path to your baby. There is another approach that isn't about restrictions and rules, but about expanding, about growth. And I think that's really exciting to think about.
Thank you. Something you touched on there is something that I am just low-key obsessed with, and that is the nervous system regulation part of things. And obviously, as a yoga teacher, it is so much of what I do. And I think that we can get very sciencey when it comes to talking about the nervous system, obviously. But can you tell me what you think this approach of slowing down and being able to regulate your nervous system has to do with fertility?
Yeah. I think that I have a whole chapter in the book devoted to slowing down, because we can't know what we need. We can't know what we want until we slow down enough to ask those questions. And so if we're just following orders from outside of ourselves, according to mainstream fertility, it's like reading someone else's map. You're going to land in places that you don't really want to go. It's kind of going to be boring. You're going to be like, I don't want to see them here. And you're just going to be like, oh, this is not my thing. And valid. So it's about learning how to read your own, what I call built-in baby compass. And so the biggest problem is from mainstream fertility, in my opinion, is that we learn not to trust ourselves. We learn that other people have the answers and that we don't know anything because, oh my God, I'm not pregnant yet. How am I supposed to know? And so a lot of my work, particularly in my book, Fertile Ground, is reestablishing that trust, not with me and not with my approach, but with yourself. And I think, to be completely honest with you, Jen, sorry, can I call you Jen or is it Jennifer?
Of course.
Is that
Australian, you shorten everything. It's fine.
Okay.
Sorry, we should cut this bit out.
I love it. I love it. I think that's what we're really yearning for, is for that deep sigh that we have our own backs, that we think we'll find inside of that positive pregnancy test. But you can actually have it now by learning that you do know what you want, you do know what you need, and that will not lead you astray. And it gets to be this good. You get to listen. You get to go to sleep when you're tired. You get to go out when you want adventure. You get to say no when you're exhausted. And so when we're rushing through life, not only is our nervous system activated in all the different ways that it can be, but mostly where that dysregulation comes from is this disconnection to self and what we need. I mean, I think the most important relationship we have in this life is the one with ourselves. And we think we know what we want and need, but do we create enough time to ask? And do we trust ourselves enough to listen? And so how do we establish self-trust is through listening to what you need, following through, and then looking back on that and saying that was the right call. And so now you have evidence. You have physical proof. You have physical evidence that you know what you need. And in that, you don't need anything outside of you anymore. And I find that to be incredibly regulating to my nervous system.
It is. And so empowering as well, when you can start to notice little changes, when you are able to just lean into what your body wants. And like you said, not doing all the things in the way that we're supposed to do them, following the rules, going to bed early, not going out on the weekends, having the perfect diet,
Where's the life in that? I mean, fertility is life. We're looking to create life. We might as well live it.
Yeah.
And be in the essence of that.
Absolutely.
Right?
Something that I find people get a little bit stuck with is, we talk about the mind-body connection. It sounds very woo and very out there. And whilst I love me a bit of woo, like, give me a cacao ceremony on a full moon, I'm all for it. But there is a lot of research that connects how our thoughts and our beliefs impact the reproductive system. So can you talk a little bit about what that research kind of shows us and why it isn't something that we should overlook or consider as woo?
Yeah. I mean, the research was done at Harvard, right? It was done at the Domar Center of Harvard. And Dr. Alice Domar, she's one of the, pioneers in mind body research. And, one of the things I really want to lay the foundation for is the beauty of mind body work is not just to get pregnant, but to alleviate suffering along the way. And so how that works from a reproductive standpoint, I mean, when we're utilizing mind body medicine, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, which is rewiring those thoughts that are creating a lot of the suffering, like I need to get pregnant or I need to do everything perfectly in order to get pregnant, right? That creates a lot of suffering in our minds because, we'll never reach perfection, but also it creates a lot of tension and a lot of tightness in our bodies, right? I don't know if we exactly need more proof than how our bodies feel when we're believing a thought that isn't benefiting the life that we want. And so Dr. Alice Domar did some research and she found that people who did and were in not just implementing mind-body medicine, but implementing mind-body medicine in a group container had an increase of 55% chance of getting pregnant.
Wow.
So, and then the other thing that I want to stress, for lack of a better word, without talking about that word stress too much, is like the remaining people who don't get pregnant, they're stressing less, right? They're living their lives more. They're loving themselves more. They're in more intimate, deep connections with other people. They're expressing their vulnerability. They feel safe to belong to the people in their lives now, regardless of waiting until they get pregnant. And another word for I guess you would know this, the parasympathetic nervous system rest and digest is feed or breed. Right? And that is when we shift out of fight or flight into rest and digest. And another word for that is, feed or breed, because we become more lubricant in our vagina. We excrete, we have more fluid down there. So I think it's just fascinating that when we establish that safety internally, it does enhance the environment for connection because we're no longer feeling like we are in survival, like we need to get pregnant in order to be okay. And there's two reasons for doing that. Yes, it does increase fertility, but you are also worthy of suffering less or not at all now. Don't have to wait for that baby to feel that relief of, oh my God, I can't, there's nothing, like my life won't go on until it happens, right? Which really only perpetuates the pressure and enhances the pressure to make it happen. And so if we can alleviate those thoughts and those behaviors and those tight emotions in your body, it's incredibly beneficial to, yes, enhancing fertility, but enjoying your life now. It's a win-win.
Exactly. And, I think that, and I myself did this, we think that when we get that pregnancy test that's positive, that's going to be the end to our suffering. Life will change. I'll go on. But there is no milestone that makes you less miserable. If this is how you're approaching your journey in your life, I remember with my first pregnancy, I don't think I exhaled until I was holding her in my arms.
Me neither.
No, and it's
even then, I don't even know. It might have taken 6 months postpartum for me to actually breathe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it doesn't go away unless you work on it. And even then, it doesn't go away. That's probably not the way of explaining it. It isn't going to lessen its grip on you until you find tools to help you through it. So what are some of the tools that you like to use with your clients that you speak about in the book, these mind-body tools that really help you on your fertility journey?
Yeah, I think one thing that you've said just right there that really is coming up is being with the uncertainty. I think a lot of people think what they hate about the fertility journey is the uncertainty part of it. And they think, oh, when I get pregnant, then I'll be okay. Finally, then I'll know what this is like. And it's like, are you kidding me? When you get pregnant, and I'm speaking to you, listener, right now, the last thing you'll feel is more chill and more certain. It is a journey of more certainty.
Mm.
And then you're preparing for labor, more certainty. And then you have this like human that you have to take care of, more certainty. And then they go out into the world and someone else is taking care of them without you there, more uncertainty. And so one mind-body tool that I use that has probably alleviated the most suffering within my work is embracing uncertainty and learning how to make peace with uncertainty. Because the only thing certain in life is uncertainty, right? And so I devoted an entire chapter to making peace with uncertainty, because I find that a lot of people on the fertility journey, you can tell me what you think about this too, but like a lot of people think I need to believe in order for it to happen. Like I need to have certainty that it's going to happen this month, right? We create this perfectionist expectation of us. And so, yes, that creates a ton of pressure, but it also is completely unnecessary in order for it to happen. A mantra, a mind-body mantra that I love is that I'm not meant to know when it's going to happen. I don't need to know why it's not happening.
Yeah.
And so I think the mind would respond with a lot of resistance to that thought. But if you let those mantras land on your body, it's actually incredibly relieving to know that you don't need to know exactly why this is happening, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. You don't need all of the answers in order for it to happen. And so in this somewhat void of uncertainty that occurs, when uncertainty lands inside of the body, there's a lot of space, like there's a lot of opening, there's a lot of freedom for what wants to unfold, and particularly in your favor. Because when we're not resisting, we give room for what wants to come through, right? Whatever we resist persists, right? That's very obvious. And I think we can look to any part of our lives to see that as true. So, when I think about mind-body medicine and mind-body tools, the reality is, okay, how is this thought, or how is this new belief that I'm kind of forming within me, how is it landing on side of my body, right? What's the physical sensation, and where is that, right? And that's what I think I love about yoga, is it's, you do pigeon pose, for example, my nemesis, but the best, right? The best and the worst. And you have this discomfort, which uncertainty is, especially when you're trying to conceive and you don't know which way to go. You don't know how, when, why, where, what, whatever. And so it's very similar to that pain that you feel in yoga, right? That resistance, that oof. And we have a choice in that moment to stop and push back and go back to doing what we were doing. Or can we lean into that sensation? Can we welcome it without judgment? And can we see what it actually wants to offer us that may yield a future in our favor? And that's why yoga is so cool, right? Because it's the actual metaphoric way of saying yes to life, of surrendering to what is, but incorporating, of course, your body in this process. And I think, the fertility journey is so analytical. It can be, right? We live so much from the neck up. We try to solve this quote unquote problem with our minds, but our bodies want to be a part of this process so, so, so bad. I mean, their body's been with you since day one. And if we can invite our bodies to be a part of this process, and instead looking to our bodies as some transactional relationship of you do what I say and then I'll be nice to you, it would alleviate a lot of suffering and bring in a lot more trust and safety towards your ideal future.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, you speak my language so much here, Spencer.
Mm-hmm.
And you're so right. We think we're so clever, and, we plan our lives, and we do all these amazing things, and we build exactly what we want. And then we forget how incredibly intelligent our bodies are. The trillions of processes that your body creates for you every single day without you even realizing, it is so inherently clever. It knows so much more than we do. And when you can, like you said, allow your body to be a part of this process, because at the end of the day, you can't tell your ovaries to ovulate, and you can't tell your embryo to implant. Like, your body is going to be doing that. So why would we leave our body out of this process? And I think that's a really, really important thing to note. And when you do go down that medical route of assisted treatments and things like IVF, like, your body is no longer yours. You hand your body over to doctors and procedures and drugs, and there's nothing wrong with any of that, but you really forget that there's a huge, huge part of this process that gets left out, and it's so inherently clever. And when we can start to lean into that and trust that as well, and you're right.
I think it's important too, to really focus on the fact that trust with our body, I talk about it in one of the chapters of my book, chapter 8, I think it is, and it's called "You Are the Vessel," because we think I can't trust my body until it heals. I can't trust my body until I get pregnant. But that's very transactional. It's like, I'm going to withhold any type of love and acceptance and appreciation and admiration and connection with you until. And your body's right here. And one beautiful way that I connected with my body when you talked about IVF, because when I was doing IVF, my body would go through so much throughout the day. And then I'd go home and I'd have a bath, and I would just put my hands on my body, and I would just say, "You're doing so good. Like, you're doing so good." And so the connection with your body can literally look and feel like that. It can be that intimate. It can be that personal. And it can be intuitive in that sense of, like, you might not know when that connection with your body is going to arise. But I mean, as women, we're taught, oh no, I'm only going to like my body if it's this weight, if it's this size, if it's making that baby, if men are into me, all of these stipulations we place on whether or not we can trust our bodies and be okay in this side of this fucking miracle. But what if it wasn't transactional, right? What if you actually gave yourself permission to be connected to it now, exactly as it is, right?
I think we would realize a lot more than what we've gotten so far. So
I agree. Can you tell me more about that, actually, Jen? What do you mean?
So I'll tell you a bit of a woo story. I was never a yoga teacher.
I felt it. I felt the woo behind that. That's why I was like, tell me more.
I was never a yoga teacher until 2020, when I, couldn't go through IVF anymore because of COVID and all the clinics were shut down. I was a Pilates instructor, and I had been for a very long time, but I was a very clinical Pilates teacher. I did a lot of post-rehabilitation work. So it was very exercise science focused, like 1 + 1 = 2. And when I started going down my fertility journey, like, the 1 + 1 does not equal 2. It's just
exactly. Logic goes out the window.
There's no logic at all. And when I started practicing yoga, it was the first time that I'd actually stopped and asked my body what I wanted. And I remember I was working with this incredible yoga teacher who specialized in women who were struggling with fertility. And after we had done this practice, she said, "I want you to put your hands over your womb. I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to ask your body if it has any messages for you." And I was like, "Oh, sounds a bit weird, but whatever." Give it a go. And I didn't believe in any of this kind of stuff, but clear as day, these words came into my head. Clear words, not my voice, that said, "You never gave me a chance." And burst into tears. It's like, how did my body give me such a strong message? And it's so funny, since then I've been able to lean into what my body wants in a lot in a much bigger way. And it's so funny, you think someone who works with bodies all day long and has worked, in that kind of industry for a long time would be quite connected to their bodies. But I wasn't. I wasn't on the level that I needed to be. I was very much, I can do this amount of pull-ups, I can hold a plank for this amount of time. It was very,
Right.
very kind of like, this is what my body can achieve. But it wasn't, what does my body feel? What does it need? And I was on birth control for so many years, and you totally disconnect.
You completely disconnect from that. Absolutely.
It's a really scary tool that is given to women, with this conversation for another day. But I think that whatever resonates with you, whether it is a yoga practice, whether it's meditation, whether it is just breathing. I think the breath is the most powerful thing that we have access to. So for me, I think that is the connection that changes everything. So
I think when we talk about communicating with our body, our brains go, I want it to be more complicated than that, because then it will feel more validating and I'll feel more productive at the end of the day. But it's stupid simple. Like my body has never communicated back to me in more than one very simple sentence. And spirit, in general kind of talks like my higher self or my spirit. It always is very simple. And it makes it very easy for us to follow through, almost to a point of annoyance, because we like complicated. Communication with the body can be very simple. And I think when you remove the conditions in which we have upon whether or not we're allowed to love them based on their performance and achievements, that resistance, the veil is lifted, and the connection can come back. That innate intelligence, that innate consciousness within our bodies, that spark of light that we all are when sperm and egg met. Right?
Yeah.
Our body is more than those numbers and those diagnoses, and that we're more than what it looks like on paper. It goes a lot deeper than that. And so I love being able to have a conversation about that.
Oh goodness, me too. We can talk about these things all day. We won't though. We'll try and keep it within at least a podcast in time. This idea of navigating the emotions of shame and isolation, I think what would probably come up 100% of the time that I work with, my students that are struggling with their fertility. How do you work through these? What kind of practices do you give your clients to help them work through, especially shame, fear? I think that even as a woman, we grow up, as you mentioned before, feeling shame for every reason imaginable. How can we navigate that when it comes to fertility, because it is amplified so much?
Yeah. I think the first step is always validation. I think that there is a part of us that kind of always feels like we don't really fit in. And I would argue every single woman in the world feels shame and worrying if she fits in with the other group of women. And so I think the first step is always just validation, like being able to hold space for that part of you that wants to belong. And so I think that when we allow space for that feeling to exist without judgment, we are giving that part of ourselves that, was rejected in the past. We're giving her a seat at the table. And I think that creates an opening for change. But I don't think that change can occur until we offer that part of ourselves a lot of compassion. Because, oh my God, in this patriarchy culture, I mean, we're one of the first generations where like a woman can actually work. Like, let's not forget how new it is for us to be able to be more than mothers. Right. And the second piece to, I think, the shame is, again, realizing everyone has it. I mean, the shitty thing about shame is that it makes you hide. But once you come out, you realize literally every single person in the planet has it. And that judgment of ourselves, of not being enough, perfectionism is right behind shame when it comes to, oh, okay, well, I need to do this, this, and this, and this. And once I do it right, then everything will be okay and I'll belong. And so Brene Brown says it beautifully. She says, it's not about, I don't know what the exact words, but it's really not about fitting in with people who are not like you, but it's finding your people and belonging, truly belonging with them. And I think what the fertility journey really illuminated for me is that it's not about fitting into the stereotypical role of what a woman needs to be, but about creating my own version of the life that I want to have and the woman that I want to be, and knowing my worth regardless of pregnancy status, gene size, bank account, numbers, and finding my people who drive with that. I think the hardest thing about shame is the isolation, like you had said. And the irony of my fertility journey is realizing I felt like I was falling behind a lot. Like I felt like I was falling behind, right? You're like, oh my God, everyone else is moving on with their lives. Meanwhile, I was going through this like tremendous inner growth that just catapulted into this immense sense of belonging and finding of my people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I would have had the confidence to find that or to discover that without the work that I did in my fertility journey, to know that my worth isn't dependent on anything else, that I am just inherently worthy. Another thing I think shame plays into this is, I think that, coming back to what it is that we need and want, I think that we aren't honest with ourselves about what we need and want because we've been shamed asking for it, right? Like women, again, Brene Brown says, women are taught to do it all, do it perfectly, and don't let them see you sweat. Holy pressure, right?
Just a little.
And if we are willing to be vulnerable enough with ourselves to actually admit what it is that we need, even if it's just something as small as ordering in pizza or, canceling that party, or even something big as I need a new career. I need to pave a new path because I'm burnt out and I hate my boss. If we can stop unshaming our needs, I think that paves the way for tremendous growth and change, because we're so afraid to even ask ourselves what we need, because it's like, well, then who's going to do that for me? And so I go through some exercises in the book, but is it like, what is it that you need? And who can you ask for help with this? And like unshaming our wants and our needs. It sounds so simple, but it's fucking everything. Right? Don't you think?
Oh, yeah. Untangling our wants and knowing that it's okay to have wants and being able to ask for help. I think that's really hard. I didn't, when I was going through my first round of IVF, I didn't even tell my mum. And that's just ridiculous. My mum and I are so close. Like, what was going through my brain that I wouldn't have reached out to my own mother for help? It just doesn't make any sense. And that just goes to show how deep this shit runs, like it is inherent in how we approach things. And I think that's not to be underestimated. So,
I know, asking for help. I mean, I think that's like one of the best things that came out of my fertility journey, because I have a partner that is 50-50, right? Like he does as much as I do. And like my mom will say, oh, Dad can help with the kids. And I'm like, no, Dad's not helping. He is, like, those are his kids too.
Exactly.
And I really think that unshaming is not only part of the fertility journey, but womanhood in general. Can we unshame what we believe our worth is made up of?
Yeah. Agree.
in this life. And we used to have so many rules and stipulation as to what it meant to be worthy. But if that wasn't the case and you are worthy now, then stop withholding those things that you need and want from yourself.
Yeah, completely
Right?
agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
What does it mean to surrender? How do you know if you're actually surrendering on this journey? Because I know it is such a big part of what we're going through.
To build on the topic, it's surrendering to yourself.
Mm.
I think we think, oh, I need to surrender to God. I need to surrender to the universe. I need to surrender to this being outside of me. No, it's about surrendering to you. Like again, listening, yielding to what you need, yielding to what you want, listening to what you are saying, what your body is saying. It's so fascinating because we think, oh, the answers are outside of me or they're in the clouds and there's someone screaming hotter and colder as to which way I should go and what I should do. And it's right inside of us all along. And that's like the most frustrating part and probably one of the biggest spiritual paradoxes of this existence, besides acceptance is what creates change. But I think it's those, I call it in the book, it's 1,000 tiny moments of listening and of saying yes. And so when we're following our perfectionist orders of, I should only want to eat avocados and kale and protein. Oh, I'm only supposed to do working out, 5 times a week. Oh, I'm not supposed to miss my vitamins, even if I forgot them and I'm in the middle of nowhere. We have all these stipulations and these shoulds and these supposed tos and these have tos. And I think that in these moments when we're following something outside of us, if we can just connect with ourselves and offer us some grace in those moments, that is surrender to me. I talk about a lot of different stories inside of my book of what it means to surrender because examples are so helpful. But just to give you an example right now, I had a client, she was going through IVF. She's 44 and her partner had 2 sons. And she's at the house and she's a stepmom and her sons are teenagers and they're, snide remarks, they're acting up, they're not being, they're getting her nervous system really activated and she's in the middle of an IVF round. And she said, Spencer, I just want to lock myself in my room. And so, of course, the perfectionist brain says, you can't do that. Get out there. You support your partner. You have to be the stepmom. You have to be the good stepmom. You can't think about yourself right now. It's selfish. And so she said, I just want to lock myself in my room. And I said, do it. Do it. Listen. What's so bad about locking yourself in your room? And so she had this like very clean, very clear desire of what it is that she needed and wanted in that moment in order to come back to a regulated state, but also just to be, more at peace. And so we have this voice of perfectionism of culture that says you're not okay to do that. And I think that surrender is surrendering to ourselves. That is what we need. That is that we are allowed and we can take up space to have that desire and that need.
I think that's said
it's
so beautiful.
These little tiny moments. I used to think surrender was going to be like, oh, like this big, like the clouds parted. And I was like, I've surrendered. No, it was 1,000 tiny moments of saying yes to me.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
So 70% of the women that work with you are pregnant within a year. That's why.
Within 1 year after working with me, yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it is.
What are the keys to that kind of success for them? What are they doing?
That's such a great question. A lot of unshaming. A lot of unshaming. To the point where they're like, Spencer, because I offer a group coaching program called Fertility Mind-Body Mastery. And there's so many women that come to mind that they're like, Spencer, I know we've talked about this 3 times, but it's so sticky and it won't go away. And I'm like, girl, let's talk about it. I'll talk about it 100 more times with you. And almost that willingness to be with them again is part of the unshaming. And that's such a great question. The unshaming and a lot of a lot of compassion. There's been some really fascinating research that autoimmune disease is linked to people who have a lot of shame. And they did these really cool tests in which they took people in and literally placed them into environments that induced shame. And they had these, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but they had these parts of their body that they tested and they skyrocketed. And then when they offered them compassion inducing techniques, right, where they framed their thoughts, they let them be in their bodies, breathing, whatever it is, these parts of their body, the part that was activated by the shame, they went down tremendously. And these parts of the bodies are actually linked to autoimmune issues. And what's really fascinating is the correlation between that, because autoimmunity is the body attacking itself. And shame is us attacking ourselves, right? And so the antidote to shame is, of course, compassion. And it's not at all about having perfect thoughts, having perfect experiences, things needing to go according to plan. It is so not about that. It's about offering yourself compassion and grace when shit hits the fan, when things are not going according to plan. How can I be in my life without blaming myself when I'm feeling things that are uncomfortable right now, like sadness or grief or bitterness or victimhood? How can I give that part of me love and tenderness and a seat at the table, like I said? And the women, and here I will say this very, very clearly, that the 30% who don't get pregnant, like, they're also thriving. Like, they are still actively living and loving their lives and growing. They're like, it's pretty remarkable. I don't consider the women who get pregnant necessarily a success. I see the women who show up as they are, willing to experience the fullness of this human life and have their own backs and know how to meet themselves where they're at instead of these crazy high expectations of perfectionism. Like, that's a success to me. There's nothing I want more for women than that. Of course, I want them to get pregnant and have that beautiful gift that they're yearning for. And I think they'd be doing a disservice to themselves by not listening to that call in their heart. But if they can know their worth, regardless of pregnancy status, when they graduate the program, I fucking won. I am yeah, that is success, because that is where we get our lives back. That is where we start living. That's where we start enjoying. That's where we are in a beautiful relationship with ourselves. So yeah, that's a very honest answer. And that is totally and completely the truth. Is they're all a success, even the ones that don't get pregnant. I think that's what's so beautiful about fertility coaches and people that are wanting to alleviate the suffering that women experience on the fertility journeys. Because when you go through conventional fertility treatment, it's kind of like you feel like, okay, this is all for nothing, right? You think either this works or it doesn't. And now the stakes are really, really high as a result. But for people like you and I that hold this space for women, they can learn to go into that experience and to be on this experience of the fertility journey and know that they're going to gain something no matter what. And in that, you can detach from it needing to happen, because you're like, oh, I don't need that to happen in order for me to feel whatever it is that you're wanting to grow into. So for example, for me, when I was going through IVF, I was like, I just want to learn how to surrender. I want to learn, I want this experience to teach me what that means. And even though I didn't get pregnant on my IVF treatment, it 100%, the vulnerability that experience gave to me 100% contributed to the experience of getting pregnant naturally. It was building blocks towards that. And I think that's really cool to look at it from that perspective, because you're no longer saying, oh, fuck, that didn't work. Oh, that was shit. Oh, that was awful. It's not all for nothing.
Mm.
And when we can approach life from that perspective, we're going to have a lot more fun.
Absolutely. And that is just not to be discounted. That, it obviously, like we said, it is so much of what we do is that we want that experienced people. We want these women we work with to become parents, but it is bigger than that. And it's being able to say, I have my life back, I think is even bigger than being pregnant. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, once you get pregnant, you're like, okay, what's the next goal?
Isn't that
In an untrained mind, right? In an untrained mind, like you're just ready to go for something else that you're chasing.
Yeah.
So why not learn how to not chase and instead attract?
I love this conversation so much. I feel like it's everything I needed to hear like 8 years ago, when I started trying to conceive. So I hope that for everyone listening to this, no matter what stage you're at on your journey, this has resonated with you, because it really is, it is so much of what you need to do to help you through this process. And I just think that when we can lean into what we need and what our body needs, it changes everything. So thank you, Spenser.
And you get to feed like that right away. Like you don't have to wait.
You get to feel it straight away. You don't have to be miserable.
You don't have to wait.
You don't have to hold on to this misery. It's such a relief. And I wish I'd gotten to that point a lot sooner on my journey, Where can people find more about you, Spenser? Where can we get your book and where can we connect with you?
Search Fertile Ground on Amazon and it'll be right there. It's so good.
Can confirm.
It really takes,
so good.
Yes, it really takes you on a journey. And I think that's what people are saying. They say like, it just feels like an experience through the whole thing. And I think that's really important to point out, because the last thing I wanted to feel like was like this rule book of everything you should and shouldn't do in trying to conceive. And then I'd love to connect on Instagram at Spenser Brassard and on my website at spenserbrassard.com. So yeah.
Thank you. I'll pop a link.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure. I would love to speak to you again and just go even deeper. We can get more woo, all of the things.
I love that I pulled the woo out of you.
Love it. Spenser, thank you so much for your time and for being here. I'll speak to you soon.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, wasn't that just the best conversation? I feel like Spenser and I are aligned on so many areas, and I just feel like I could chat to her for hours and hours about this stuff. So thank you so much for being here and listening right to the end. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone or leave a review, which really helps us to bring this information out to as many people as possible. If you're interested in learning more about Spenser's work or grabbing a copy of her book, I will add a link to both of those in the show notes. And remember, if you want to go into this deeper practice of the mind-body connection as you're trying to conceive, you can also jump into the Element Fertility Yoga course. And this is the most comprehensive online course that you'll find available. And it helps you use the tools of yoga, breathwork, and meditation to really get into the nitty-gritty of all this stuff. And on top of that, it has so many physiological benefits. We get that increased circulation, blood flow happening, the synchronization of our hormones, and it just makes your journey of trying to conceive that much easier. So I will add a link to that down below as well. Now, on the next episode of the podcast, I'm chatting to my very good friend and fellow yoga teacher, Carrie Hines, about how you can approach your fertility journey if you're a bit like me and you're a bit of a perfectionist, type A, doing all the things as you're trying to conceive, but you're finding it is just getting you nowhere. If that sounds like you, then that is definitely the episode you need to listen to. So I will see you back here next week. Until then, I am sending you all my love as you continue your own journey to fertility. The most common thing I hear from students who are on their fertility journey is that the stress of trying to conceive has taken over their life. Your days end up being filled with endless appointments, navigating pregnancy announcements. You're trying to eat right, take all your supplements, and it is all you think about from the moment you wake up. I designed the Element Fertility Yoga course to support your body, your mind, and your mental health in 3 important ways: to synchronize your hormones, increase circulation and blood flow, and to help regulate your nervous system. But on top of this, the greatest gift that you can give yourself throughout this journey is a sense of peace, to help you calm your mind and just make this process feel easier. Every single one of my students tell me that this is the first thing they notice after starting a yoga, meditation, and breathwork practice. But on top of this, you have the amazing benefit of actually supporting and increasing your fertility. Studies have shown that those participating in mind-body programs as they're trying to conceive have success rates 3 times greater than those who don't. The course I've designed walks you through natural conception as well as fertility treatments and IVF cycles. And the best part is you can work through it at your own pace in the comfort of your home. The practices start from just 10 minutes per day. To learn more, visit elementpilatesyoga.com or see the link in the show notes.